Okay, so I'm one of 8 kids, second oldest, and I grew up in South Sacramento. And from my memory, we had an absolutely wonderful, free-spirited childhood. The entire neighborhood tended to congregate at our house, and we played and just did a lot of things. I think I did not know until I went away to college that we were, maybe on the needy side. It was only then that I realized that other people had a lot more, because our whole neighborhood didn't really have much. And kind of a funny story along those lines is later on when they talked about giving chimpanzees some, I think it was 125 square foot per chimpanzees. I did the calculations, and in our house growing up, we had less than 100 square feet per person. If you did it's 1,100 square foot house, and with a grandmother and 10 people, it was a total of 11 in 1,100 square foot house. So it was very close. Never, we just, I remember it absolutely wonderful. I left home at 17 to go to college. And that was hard because I was leaving everybody else behind, but it was also exciting. I didn't have, the support that some people do, in that, I hadn't been taken around to colleges or anything. It was absolutely assumed that I would go to college. But I remember applying pretty much on my own, and my first day to go to college was I got to borrow the car, drive to the other city with the map on the passenger seat, and try and find my way to this college that in my mind was a little bit bigger than the high school.
Oh my goodness.
So, it was, but again, I had no idea. If you don't know difference, it's, I only figured it out in retrospect that that's not necessarily the norm.
What number were you in the 8? You said second to the oldest?
I was the second to the oldest, yeah. So probably I've carried a lot of responsibility all my life.
And what did you like to do as a kid? What were your hobbies?
I was very active. I think in grammar school I was the most valuable athlete. In high school I was the most valuable athlete. And in college I played 2 varsity sports 4 years, and was most outstanding athlete my junior year.
What was your sport?
I had 2 sports, one women's fast pitch softball and field hockey.
Oh my goodness.
And again, that just comes from all that playing outdoors every day, every night, every weekend. I went to 12 years of Catholic school, so I was, kind of, thinking I would be a missionary or something like this, third world. So that was more kind of, how could I, but again, there was not a lot of guidance or, suggestions like there is today.
And did you have an idea of what you wanted to do when you went to college, or was it just the big? You said you were 17 when you went to.
I was 17, yeah, and I think I would have gone, put myself down as I was biological sciences, not really, passionate about it. Pre-med, veterinary medicine. I had zillions of animals growing up, zillions. It was a problem. Hard to say what I didn't have, and this is on top of my father would always say, no, you can't bring anything home, but he was really, my father's stern, but he's actually the biggest heart in the world. And so on the background of that, we had 3 dogs and numerous cats at the same time. And, his typical response was, okay, if you bring them home, which kid are we going to get rid of? And then we'd have a big old fight over which one. And we were serious, which one got to go, We wanted to pitch this one out or that one out, and, really thinking that we had a chance to do this. But so I think that was probably more than anything.
Any particular role models in high school or college?
Probably in high school there was a lot of, the nuns were really, I think, there was a number of them that were very caring and really interested in trying to really teach you how to do well in life. Honestly, I have to say that their expectations were really quite low because I graduated in 1973. So, many of my classes, not many, I mean, we had the math and the science and theology and whatnot, but we also had typing because we were going to be, typists, or I took sewing from Sister Marianne because, God forbid, you needed to know how to sew because you might have to make your living sewing and altering and stuff like this. So that was, I think that's the downside of my education, is it wasn't particularly progressive in the standpoint of, what we consider a really quality education today. But the flip side of it is we made, really good friendships, and we had courses in theology and, they weren't called ethics, but situations and dilemmas. And, they really did, I think, teach you to be good people. So from that standpoint, it was very valuable.
When were you first interested in primates?
Since 3 years old. I used to hang out at the zoo, not hang out, but I went to the zoo, with our family. That's what we did. You could go to the zoo, and it was free in those days, and have a picnic in the park. And I would watch the chimpanzees and the monkeys for hours. And my parents would tell me this and interact with them and everything. So when I got a chance to volunteer at the Davis Veterinary School at the Primate Center, and it was, that was the thing that just was the passionate light bulb that went on. It was so interesting. I would have, worked there for free for the rest of my life. It was just, taking care of the monkeys. They were so interesting and so charismatic, if you will. That's kind of maybe not the right word for them, but they just drew me in. And that on top of, I was just learning a lot about, medicine and surgery on the primates. I did my residency there at the Primate Center. And so that was, not having worked with them before and coming in kind of predisposed to liking them was, I think, probably the crystallizing moment.
Can you recall what was your first experience with research? Not necessarily in school, but...
Well, that's actually a funny question because I considered myself throughout that whole time in my head a monkey doctor. And that's honestly what I was. I was a resident in primate medicine for the first 2 years. And for the next 3 or 4 years, I was an assistant and then associate veterinarian at the Primate Center. And my job was to help facilitate the research. So I would work with the different scientists, doing bronchoalveolar lavages or doing their particular surgeries for them or helping in some way. And, that would be one part of the job. The other part of the job was to, the animals that got sick in the colony, just spontaneously, we would patch them up or fix them up in some way. And so that, I think, really went all in my head as to, I was a primate doctor. We called ourselves the monkey doctors. I left Davis to come down to San Diego. My husband at the time wanted to do a move, and so I did it for those reasons. The marriage didn't work out, but when I came down, I still considered myself a monkey doctor, but I was looking at 2 jobs, and one was at University of California, San Diego, and one was at Scripps, where I'm currently at. And I still, they both had monkeys or primates, and so I was still thinking along those lines. And it wasn't really until I was about a year into the Scripps job that I thought, you can't call yourself a monkey doctor. You're a research animal veterinarian. And this is on the background of, at that time, the primate medicine people did not take the lab animal boards. We were actually not allowed to because we weren't lab animal people. Within our own kind of, veterinarian field supporting research, there was a, non-specific stigma. The people who went through the training programs, predominantly on the East Coast, Michigan was a big one, Alabama was a big one, Birmingham, Alabama, MIT, they all were trained with rodents in the classical lab animal medicine species. And so the primate species people didn't fit in anywhere, nor did they really have an interest in taking the boards. ACLAM, American College of Lab Animal Medicine, administered an examination. It was relatively new, maybe 10 or 12 years, and you had to apply to be able to sit for the exam, and you had to have a certain amount of training. And our primate residency, 2 years of training in primate and subsequent experience, did not count. And so a lot of people didn't have the interest in the primate world to take them, but also the message at the time was no. And so that 1 year, it was 1989, 3 residents, myself, Jeff Roberts, and Jan Southers, who were all primate residents, and actually there was one other one, Don Mall, from the Davis Primate Center. We had been for different years. We all studied for the boards and took them, and put our applications in, and they were not turned back. And I don't know if before that anybody had been turned back, but it was kind of the known that, no, you don't take those boards. And so that particular year, the 4 of us passed, and some of the lab animal people had actually not passed. And it was, from then on, it was a done deal. You know, primate people, primate residency trainees could take the lab animal medicine boards. And in fact, 4 out of 4 passed.
So comment on the situation. Should primate people have been taking these all along?
The board examination was relatively new, certification. So in any kind of a new situation, you maybe don't get it right out of the chute. And again, I don't know that there was any, somebody who, you put your application in and they said absolutely not. It was the combination of it wasn't really considered relevant because it was called lab animal boards and we were primate medicine. But in fact, and there has been always, and still till today, is a schism between those who are trained in rodent medicine and management and those who are trained in primate medicine and management. But they're all one part, and today they're now recognized as, 2 facets of the same area.
Okay. I want to go back to my question, what was your first experience in research? So I want to know your naive brain, naive to research.
Mm-hmm.
What did you think research was? And then what was your actual first exposure to it? And what was your change in thinking?
Okay, so that's a difficult question because my first exposure to research would be at the California Primate Research Center. And since I entered as a primate medicine resident trainee and really took care of the monkeys and facilitated research, and that I worked side by side with the people to make their research happen, and we were colleagues and friends and, saw each other outside of work and such, to me, it never dawned on me that I was doing any research. I knew that these were researchers. I was just taking care of the monkeys and helping them get their research done. I knew probably at some level it was research, but, and the Davis Primate Center was very progressive at the time. There was 2 individuals who were my mentors, Dr. Roy Henriksen and Dr. John Anderson, and they had extremely high standards. They spent a lot of time mentoring their trainees and really trying to see that we could negotiate through and be a very positive resource for the research community because they felt that was really important. So I really did not own inside myself until I moved down to Scripps for a year or 2, and I thought, you can't, lie to yourself anymore. You are not just a monkey doctor. You are a research animal veterinarian. And honestly, that was hard for me to own because that wasn't what it didn't make me as proud as being a monkey doctor. That's all I can say. I don't know really the source of that, but I can just say that that's true. And shortly thereafter is when I figured, okay, so if you're a research animal veterinarian, and it was down in the Southern California area, there were maybe 2 board-certified laboratory animal veterinarians, many on the East Coast, because that's where the established research place. But on the West Coast, it was, I can only think of 2 at the time. And, I would get all the time over at Scripps, I'd be trying to make some changes or what I considered improvements, and I would get, well, they don't do that over at the university. And I was so tired of hearing about how they didn't do it here because, again, I was relatively young. I think I started there at 31. I had 0 credibility, realistically, in a very prestigious research institute. And, the university didn't have to do it, so why did they have to do it? So it was that kind of crystallizing moment that, you know what, like it or not, and I really didn't want to have to take another exam, you better take this exam because that's the only way you're going to have the credibility. And so I studied for it, sat for it, and passed.
What do you think people need to understand about primates? Why is the study of primates important to us and to research?
Well, the trite answer is that phylogenetically they're so close to us. And honestly, that's true. If you go down to the level of the uterus, they're the only ones that have a corpus like we do. There are other species have horns, the uterine horns. And so really they are the closest to us. And that also makes them problematic. They are very smart. They're very intelligent. They are, they're different. I can't explain, and I know that sometimes people categorize it as speciesism, but there is a huge difference between a mouse and a monkey. The arguments whether they're, have the same emotion that we have or the same cognitive abilities that we have, I can't answer those questions. But what I can tell you is that, when you're working with them, they understand to a certain level. They are susceptible to, changes and or different persons, and and if you're aware and looking for this, you can see it. They have their own hierarchies out in group situations. They can be as nice and benevolent as people are, but they can be also as nasty as people are. So they're not people, I know that, but they're also not just unaware animals. I believe that they are necessary for the speed of advancement that we've been making over the last 40, 50 years. They offer models that you can't find in other animals. Having said that, the other thing that I would want people to know is that there are investigators that are incredibly caring and sensitive and moved by working with non-human primates. And, there are investigators who are absolutely oblivious to them having any feelings whatsoever. And since I do believe that research using primates under certain circumstances is essential to continue the speed, and one could argue, do we need that speed? But, if you've got a sick family member, I think you do want that speed, is very important. But at the same time, they require incredible attention to detail and care, in return for their service. And I also think that, so this would be addressed to the research community. If I firmly believe this, that the best guarantee to continue research is to treat the animals the absolute best you can, because you don't have to, everybody knows how things happen. Within a facility, they know who's taking good care and who's oblivious. And, other people find out this. And it's just a matter of time, and it doesn't matter who and how, and people always get, well, this and this and this, chase it down. Bottom line is, if you exercised responsible care and use, I honestly think you have the best chance of maintaining that privilege granted by society to use those animals in research. And that if you continue to allow that very, very, very small percentage of investigators who really are, I would say, abusive. And to put that in perspective, I've been working in the field 31, 32 years. I have seen maybe 2 instances of real, what I would consider abuse for, an individual's, other things have been negligence or ignorance or whatever, but that, so 2 people in 32 years is not much, but those 2 people, when it's identified, it needs to be stopped, and it needs to be stopped by their colleagues. No regulatory agency is really going to be able to address it from the outside coming in and making a decision on he said, she said. That's not going to happen. It has to happen from inside with their colleagues, because the colleagues are also going to be the ones that are impacted if they don't.
Have you seen colleagues step up like that when it's called for?
No, I haven't. But that's, and I have to qualify that. I have seen, members of the research team, the broader research team, veterinarians, animal health technicians, research technicians step up. But when it's a high-level senior faculty, I have seen people express dismay and regret off to the side, but I have not seen them actually go forward and speak out.
I would like to think that this is something from the past and that these situations do not continue to happen. Have you seen a change in behavior or attitude?
Oh, absolutely. Over the time, again, progress is made, and tremendous progress. People are so much more knowledgeable these days. There's an entire generation that has been trained since when I first started to today. And these people are very much more aware. So I think we're talking 2 different things. I think individuals themselves are much more aware and treat their models much more responsibly at this point in time. But I think it's also, and this is, again, I'm not a psychologist or a sociologist, but there's something in human nature where people can see it's wrong, but they don't speak up. And I don't really know why, but that I think that there's a genuine drive within the human being. This is just my idea, so maybe you don't put this on. A genuine drive in the human being to get along and to belong to a social cohesion. And when you stand out and move aside from that group, you are then, moving away from conformity and from cohesion, and that is, I think, maybe not, we know that that's not good for survival, and depending on whatever survival means to you. And so people inherently know that. And there's always, that the bystander probably comes into it, well, I don't have to, there's, 50 other people that can see this too, and they could stand up also. But again, unless and until somebody says something, a colleague, because they carry the weight that nobody else carries. Again, I mentioned that there's so few of those 2 types. We see a lot of negligence, and that's just people not providing adequate time, and we're all busy. And so, we all cut corners. And so you can deal with negligence by making, a disincentive to be negligent. And so you just kind of build that into the system, and that works. People who are ignorant, you can provide training and knowledge, and that's the remedy for that. These other few situations that I talk about, I don't think that there's an answer to them. And to go back to what your analogy was in human beings, why are there human beings that are so horrible to other human beings? That there's pathology there of some sort, a drive that other people don't understand. And it would fit very small numbers, the same very, very small numbers. With research, every piece is just a piece. And so there's no, slam dunk, if you will.
Right.
And so everybody is just one small little piece of the puzzle, and one time that you work on this model is just one more question. So, the closest slam dunk I can think of is we had an investigator at Scripps that was working on a synthetic surfactant in order to try and remedy some of the neonatal lung injuries. And, we actually did a lot of the groundwork at Scripps on rabbits, and then he actually took it back up to, I was working at Scripps, but we went up together to the Davis Primate Center, and they had a neonatal intensive care unit, and, we worked all-night shifts with the baby monkeys, instilling surfactant on prematurely delivered, animals, and it became, got into clinical trials and commercialized, and, it's maybe not the absolute end-all to beat-all, but it's a help. And that's probably one of those examples that goes from beginning to end.
So you had, not I want to say a crisis of identity, but anyway, you moved, in your own mind, you moved from monkey doctor to animal research, animal veterinarian. And that's when you were at Scripps.
And took the lab animal boards, and actually, once you become a boarded lab animal medicine person, there's no denying that you are a lab animal veterinarian.
Exactly.
Scripps is a private nonprofit research institute. It's world-renowned, established in 1960. It recruits, some of the top talent, and they're very, very dedicated to their work and work extraordinarily hard to fund, their research, their own. And since we're private, we don't get any money from the state or anything, but they get through they have to be competitive, and most of their money comes through grant funding. And so that's a testament to their ability to really do high caliber research. Shortly after I was hired, they hired an executive vice president, and he wanted to do things right. And so the two of us, made our way. And I never planned to stay at Scripps. Another funny story on that one is when I was doing my residency, my boss, Roy Hendrickson, who I mentioned as my mentor, he would come back from consulting trips at Scripps Research, and he would tell us, we all gather all the residents around and, just tell us how, this is wrong and this is wrong and you don't do it this way. So I grew up on all of Scripps' mistakes. And so here I am ending up at Scripps. And I actually had my eye on the job over at UCSD, but when I went over to interview, it was a veterinarian and his wife was also a veterinarian. And I thought, I can't work for, and they were picking at each other, and I was kind of having marital problems at the time, and I can't work for, a husband-wife combinations that's picking for each other. So I had to call back to Scripps and say, where am I on your list? And they said, well, we got the impression that you weren't really interested. And I said, oh, where did that come from? And I really wasn't interested initially, but all of a sudden it became much more interesting after I interviewed over at UCSD. And so we grew up together, the vice president and I, and made our way. And so it turned out maybe to be good in the long run.
Describe some of the changes you've seen then in the last 20 years since you've been there.
Oh, just tremendous. Training programs and, real protocol reviews and, care for the animals, daily care for the animals.
This has been a very interesting time period because this is almost like you got there right at the beginning when things were being standardized.
I started my career on the Silver Springs monkey year, so And so I have lived through, I didn't recognize, the milestones as they were occurring but I do remember. I remember when NIH released the IRAC principles. I was like, okay. And I knew, that we were supposed to have an IACUC, but everybody was struggling and didn't know what an IACUC was. And, then 1989 came and there was the rewrite of the Animal Welfare Act and all of that. And so with the vice president and I, we would read the stuff and say, okay, this is what needs to be done and this is how we should do it. And then we would go ahead and implement it. So we were able to I wouldn't say we blasted to the front of the line, but we were able to be responsible and responsive to, what seemed appropriate and what the changes were as they were going on.
Is there a particular thing, I know over the years it's been one giant sort of accomplishment, but is there a particular thing you can look back on and say, wow, we really did a good job on that. I'm proud of that one.
Yeah, when I just look back at the program, there was no program. And, there's a program today, and it's, a responsible program. And, yeah, I would say that.
So to be self-reflective just for a moment, what skill set or personality traits can you identify in yourself that helped you do this job?
I like to facilitate, and I'm an optimist. So, and I'm a jack of all trades, master of none. So I like to jump in, and I like to figure out things and work with people, and one-on-one. I'm not afraid of. I'm not afraid of working with people. Actually, people a lot of times like to phone or email and don't like to have the contact, but I prefer to jump out of my chair, walk to their office, knock on their door and just, walk in and say, this or this or this, or, they call and I'll say, let's meet down here. So I think that's the desire to really connect as human beings rather than as virtual entities. And in the olden days, we didn't have email or anything. It was phone calls. And so, there was a lot of people, not a lot of people, but, in those days, it was the people who would be nice to you in the hall, and you get back to your office, and they would scathing phone call. And then you'd walk out and see them in the hall, and they would be nice to you again, that kind of stuff. And that has never been part of my my fabric. I've gone out and, if I have something to say, I will just walk in and, just say it. And I usually am respectful, and I'm always questioning, whether I'm right or wrong. And, I want to find the working position. That is my motivating force. So, for example, if there's a protocol that comes through and my first read is, oh my God, there's no way. My second thing is, we're going to end up doing this. What is the best way? And then, making it happen so that it is the best way. And most of the time, in my experience, that's all people really want. And I've had people say, just tell me what you want, Beth, and I'll do it. And so you've got to be able to be, strong enough to say, this is what I want. This is why I want it. And, not waffle and not, hem and haw and whatnot. And so I'd say that those qualities.
What advice would you give to somebody who's entering the field now?
Go into it because you believe in the field and you want to make a difference, knowing full well that it's going to be difficult, and that you're going to have to really embrace the challenge to make it right. Because there are people who take jobs and within, a couple, 3, 4 months, 6 months, they're toxic. And to me, that's very, very unfair. You take the jobs knowing that they're difficult, otherwise, they wouldn't need you. And so you go in there, you own that job, and you've really got to use every resource within your being to make it work. And so that's what I would say. If you're going in there because you think it's prestigious, if you think it's, whatever it is, that's the wrong reason. You've got to go in there because you believe in it and you want to make it, that much better.
What do you think is the greatest challenge that you face on a daily basis when you're trying to do your job?
This may change, at different times. You've got me at this point in time. I would say it's administrative politics. When you work side by side, one-on-one with the research groups, you're on the same page. You get influence from, the higher up administrative people who've got other agendas or other information that you don't have access to, or the legal group or something else. It becomes much more difficult. And I sometimes wonder, and I don't have the final word, but I wonder, are sometimes these layers self-perpetuating? They have to create something to justify their existence. I don't know this, I'm sure that they've got some importance. That's a horrible thing to be saying, that all these, vice presidents or whatever, provosts or whatever, I'm sure they have really important jobs, but I would say that they're out of touch enough with the actual research teams, and maybe more so in touch with the risks that they're panicking over, that they're not helpful. Sometimes. They can be very helpful, because I gave you that experience with the vice president and I. Without his help and support, we never would have been able to really move forward as in the time frame that we did to just have a quality program. I hear and I read a lot of articles about how the past 2 decades in animal research has not been predictive of success when it moves to the human field. And there's a number of articles. I actually have a file folder. I'm keeping it. And that actually doesn't surprise me that much. Again, I'm not an expert, but when I think about how we do things, it's, in such defined models in the animals, and there's such controlled conditions, and then you take this to a, heterogeneous human population with uncontrolled conditions, it's going to be very difficult. So I think that the animal models have been very important in parsing out, mechanisms. But piecing those mechanisms together into something that's as helpful for advancing human medicine, I think we've not done a good job of. So I would say that if I were to try and visualize a important or effective, I would say it has to be human-animal interface much more. I know that they've got the translational units, but they tend to be their own units, and they have these units, and they call upon different expertise. But it really has to be, we found this in animals, what's the analog in humans, and then bring it back to animals, and they have to be talking much more closely. And we don't see this. There's some places that have physician scientists at a higher percentage, but there tends to be the very, very focused research scientists and the very, very knowledgeable and very busy MDs that have the human entities, and not a lot of real talk. And I think to make the headway, you've got to have, joined at the hip, those two groups.
How would that look logistically?
You'd have to free up time, because both entities are absolutely full throttle in their own arena. So the MD, physicians who are seeing and running clinical trials and really top of their field and know everything that's working and not working in humans, has got to be able to have a significant amount of time to talk to the researcher who's looking at pathways and mechanisms and what's they're identifying as might be important, or this gene pathway or whatever. Both of them have to recognize that they can keep going, but they won't be nearly as successful as if they we all have the same 24 hours. It's just how you use it. And so if you're use that same analogy in the research, if you're doing 12-hour days, at least 4 hours has to be put in crosstalk with somebody else that's similar. If you had 8 hours in the clinics with humans and 8 hours in the lab, with your models and your test tubes and whatnot, and you kept that 4 hours of crosstalk, really had a significant overlap. I say 4 hours, it can be whatever, a significant, then you'd both understand each other's, and it wouldn't be just a one-time a meeting here and there. It would be a commitment to know that both of you would profoundly benefit from it. I think the experts would have the knowledge to speak the same language. I don't think early in the career, because you really have, research scientists who may not understand the clinics. The MD, PhD physician scientist is a rarity, and they're stretched so thin doing their own stuff. So you're talking about PhDs who are phenomenally focused and well-trained in one area, and the MD clinicians over here, whether it's a resident or a fellow starting out, or a postdoc or a junior faculty member, I don't think that they will be able to connect in the same way. But what I can tell you, and I've seen this, over and over again, is that whatever the seniors do, whoever's the dominant alpha male, whether it's if they set the stage, everybody will follow. If we can get one lab PI to be doing it, his whole group does it. If you've got one asshole that won't do it, then their whole lab is entitled to be that same type of personality. So if you really get that and get those people talking, I do think it has to start at that level, even though they are, as you said, the most senior and established, and there's no real advantage because they've made their career and their name. So this morning, the very first speaker who was talking about going from humans to mouse models, xenograft models for tumor cancer therapy, and then back to humans, and then back to models. I think that was a brilliant talk, and that is, I think, the model for the future. Now, she stumbled onto it, and I would guess that it has made her work tremendously successful. And when people see the success, they see the value, they make the commitment.
Let's talk a little bit about Primer. How long have you been attending Primers?
I think since 1995.
Oh, that's a good long time.
Yeah, I think it was I didn't know of Primer until Joan brought it to San Diego. And I met her when she was considering bringing it out to San Diego, and kind of, just showed her a little bit around. And I was really very happy that she brought it to San Diego, because I mentioned that there was only a couple board certified people, and we were, from what I could tell, very far behind much of the rest of the country as far as progress. And we needed, NIH to come out and give seminars. We needed, anybody. And people were reluctant because it was an unknown. And she was the first one that I can recall that actually came out and, had a meeting. And, it wasn't a done deal. It was, high risk. If you don't get the people coming, it can be a bust, and you're financially, in the hole. So I credit her with really starting the training on the West Coast. I'm always a little bit disappointed that it's just tends to be preaching to the choir. On the other hand, you have to keep that choir activated. And I think the most wonderful thing, and I, again, credit Joan with this, is that, because I've been on a lot of the teleconferences for planning the committee meetings, is, trying to get disparate voices. That's important. If you're preaching to the choir and it's the same old script, you're not making any headway. If, on the other hand, you're risking by including somebody who's not mainstream or doesn't share the same views, and maybe at some point you'll find common ground, probably not. But if you never try, you will never. The answer is never. You will never try it. But if you do try, there is the chance that you can benefit from all viewpoints. Animal research is not perfect. It's not done the way it should be done each and every time. There are mistakes, and there are purposeful problems. And we need to, as animal research people, address those straightforward. not sugarcoat them, not call them something else, but our goal should be to move forward trying to make it better. The animal rights, or that the other side, if you will, they tend to take things out of context and stretch them. And so what they're saying is not entirely true either. And so I don't see making progress until everybody owns up to it's not as bad as they say. In fact, it's, most people are quite responsible, and I would want the public to know that. But they're right. It's not perfect. Most people try to do the right thing, but there's mistakes. And then there's a few times where, there's situations where they've truly been allowed to get out of hand. And that should never be. And so, but that's life, and I think the American public actually is sophisticated enough to know that. I mean, and I think if we just spoke honestly and openly about it, we might actually be able to make some headway and find the common ground. It's not as bad as they say it is. It's not as good. It's not perfect, and that we're all working towards, I think, the same common goal, which is trying to responsibly use animals when we have to for answering specific research questions that will really help people and animals and make it, less suffering and whatnot, responsibly.